evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 19, 2013 meeting of the Downers Grove Village Council. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our business agenda on either side of the room tonight. If you haven't already done so, please feel free to pick up a copy and follow along with our proceedings tonight. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment, both with respect to items that are on our agenda, as well as a segment under Section 4 of our agenda, Public Comments, where we will entertain questions, comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our agenda tonight. So it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this point, I would ask everyone to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye. Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. And that brings us to item 3 of our agenda, minutes of prior council meetings. We have one set of council meeting minutes to review and approve tonight, and those are our minutes from our November 12, 2013 meeting. Do any members of the village council have any changes, questions, or corrections, or comments with respect to those minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those minutes are approved. Any against? Those minutes are approved. Just checking there. Before we get to public comments, I do have a proclamation to read tonight in honor of a special day, Small Business Saturday. And Linda Kunze from our Downtown Management Corporation is here today to accept the proclamation after it's being read. And I'll invite Linda to come up to the podium afterwards and tell us why we all shop small or shop local. I don't like to shop small. I think we got to shop large but local. I think we got to change that commercial a little bit. Whereas November 30th, 2013 is Small Business Saturday, a nationwide campaign to spur business for small merchants. And whereas Small Business Saturday is a day to come together in support of the small businesses we love. And whereas small businesses are comprised of the shops and restaurants that employ our neighbors and reinvest our money close to home. And whereas small businesses are the heartbeat of our community and local economy. Now, therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim Saturday, November 30th, 2013, as Small Business Saturday in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all citizens to support businesses in Downers Grove this holiday season. Ms. Kunze, would you please join me in the front? You got a shopping bag. Awesome. You're ready. You now wait till Saturday. All right, terrific. That's for you. And if you want to step to the podium and tell us a little bit more about the kind of things that people would expect this weekend, that'd be terrific.
That would be great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, so very much. On behalf of all the small businesses in Downers Grove, I think all our residents, we would like to encourage to consider stopping at the small businesses before they head out to the malls. I think they'll be surprised by all the services and gift wrappings and little treats that they'll be able to enjoy next Saturday, which is the Gingerbread Festival does kick off that Friday night with our tree lighting ceremony. So I have brought a bag for each of you to put all your small goodies in that you find in all our small stores, and something you can carry with you. So maybe I will pass them this way.
Sure, there's only one problem with that bag. That's not nearly large enough for Commissioner Durkin. He's going to need a much larger bag. than
Much
that.
larger. I know, I see him shopping all of you downtown, so thank you, thank you. And we appreciate the proclamation and hope all the businesses in Downers Grove will take advantage of it, and all the residents will think of them also on that great day of shopping. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you being here. And again, I think we got to say shop large and local. That's what we got to change it to, but we'll go with that. Thank you very much for being here and reminding everyone to shop local here in Downers Grove on Small Business Saturday. With that, we come to item 4 on our agenda. As I mentioned earlier, this is the segment of our agenda where we entertain comments of a general nature with respect to items not appearing on our business meeting agenda tonight. So if there are any public comments or questions of a general nature, We would ask for anyone who would like to make such a comment to please come down to the podium. The protocol is to give us your name and your address, and we would welcome hearing from you. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, Councilman. Thank you so much for hearing me. My name is Giuseppe Badalamenti. I am the managing member of Pizza Truck LLC, a food truck that is operating out of the city of Westmont. I have spent the majority of my life in Downers Grove. I consider myself to be a product of Downers Grove and a son of Downers Grove. However, I am not able to operate my business within the village of Downers Grove. As a food truck, there are no food truck laws that guide my business in operation. I feel that I should be granted equal protection under the ordinances of the village as granted to me by the State of Illinois Constitution. One example of how I'm not granted equal protection is there is a mobile vending for ice cream trucks. However, there's not mobile vending for any other types of trucks. I would like to bring to your attention also that these mobile ice cream trucks are not regulated in any way, shape, or form and do not need a business license from the village of Downers Grove, which is peculiar to me when I am told that I cannot operate my business without a business license from the village of Downers Grove. Also, I'd like to bring to your attention that we do not regulate or we do not even consider who is driving these trucks, ice cream trucks, and selling this ice cream to our children. I think this is a very important matter that has been overlooked by the council and needs to be addressed. As far as my business is concerned, I should be able to operate my chosen occupation as long as it does not impede the public good, public trust, or public morals of this community. I am granted that right under the Illinois state and federal constitution as well. So I ask the commissioners today respectfully to consider ordinance and dedicate resources that would allow my business to operate legally within the village of Downers Grove.
Terrific. Thank you very much for being here. I know you and I had a very nice phone call earlier today. I
Yes, sir.
appreciated you taking my call because I wanted to share a couple things with you, and I'm glad you still came down so that everyone could hear this. First of all, as I explained, this is at least as far as the council is concerned, a new issue. I think this is something we've only recently brought to our attention in maybe a week or less amount of time. So we haven't had a whole lot of time to give it a lot of thought, but we appreciate your comments. The other issue is that there are a number of things that municipalities regulate, and our power also derives from the state of Illinois state constitution because we can basically regulate what the state doesn't get in our way. And lots of municipalities regulate all sorts of things. And sometimes people want to operate businesses in certain parts of town, and we have the ultimate authority to either say yes or no. We had a petitioner come before us, wanted to put something in our downtown within the last 6 months, and that was not allowed. You know, the power to regulate is pretty well established. And it's true that we don't have an ordinance that right now would allow that to happen, but it's not an ordinance that can't ever happen or that they're banned. It's more of this simply doesn't currently support that particular type of activity. And as I think you and I discussed, that has happened before, and we've been responsive where it makes sense and it's in the best interest of the community, which ultimately we represent. And so we have to have a process where we understand and give the community an opportunity to be involved and then reflect their wishes. The example I shared with you was, I think it was maybe 10, 12 years ago, we didn't have any ability for restaurants in our downtown to have sidewalk cafes. I mean, there was a restaurant already operating downtown, they couldn't put a few chairs out and serve people who wanted to have a meal outside. They couldn't do that. The request was put for us to, is that something that they could do, because they were, in many instances, utilizing the public right-of-way. It's something the community had to think about, something the council had entertained, or had to be developed, staff time was devoted to it. Well, here we are 12 whatever years later, and of course there's all kinds of sidewalk cafes. The other example I mentioned to you was a gentleman that came to us a number of years ago looking for a special category of liquor license to support a comedy club. Well, we didn't have that within our ordinance. So we had to create it, but again, it wasn't something that we do knee-jerk. It's something that we do after some mindful discussion interaction with the community. And so it's not a question of we don't think this is a good idea, or we wouldn't want to welcome you to our community. It's just something we have a process that we have to undertake, and this is, at least from our perspective, a relatively new issue. We just haven't had a chance to think about it. And we would also have to work with our staff in terms of prioritizing, what do you got, 2 or 3 other things going on right now you're working on? Yeah, I think that list gets longer every week. But I also shared with you, and as long as we're on the topic, share with my colleagues, I had the good fortune to be in Seattle last week for National League of Cities, which is a conference where municipalities from all around the country get together. And as luck would have it, there was a 2-hour seminar on mobile vendors and how cities like Portland and Seattle and Boston and other towns have dealt with the growing popularity and also challenges that are presented by mobile vendors. And it's not just food trucks, there are other mobile vendors. And one thing that I appreciated, that I didn't appreciate fully before that session, is number one, that it's really about entrepreneurship, because I just read a proclamation about small businesses and how valuable they are to our community. Mobile vending allows a lot of businesses to get started with much less capital than they otherwise would need to, or access to credit, and that they may become very successful and ultimately turn into brick and mortar businesses, and that kind of entrepreneurship are the kind of things that we certainly want to incubate in any community. So that's something that I think is a positive thing for everyone to hear. But the other thing that I learned is that every single community that has adopted a mobile vending license has not done so overnight. They've done so through mindful study of the issue, discussion, and then they've come up with an ordinance that's best suited for that community. And I'm talking about the communities where food trucks have been wildly popular and well embraced. These cities still have to have the right kind of ordinances to deal with it. So I think all I was saying to you on the phone earlier today and now is that, give us an opportunity to go through our own process. I understand that in the minds of many, the wheels of justice turn slowly and the wheels of government turn backwards, but we're going to try to do the best we can. Ice cream trucks, Commissioner Durkin's been asking for that subject to be addressed for some time, and there's a possibility this could all be wrapped up into the same type of ordinance. I mean, I do realize that there's a difference between prepackaged food and preparation on site. That's a county health ordinance. So basically, again, I appreciate you coming here tonight. I think we understand the issue. Really just asking you to give us a chance to follow our own processes, involve our community, and come up with an approach to this that may make sense, consistent with all the other burdens that we have on staff right now to get a lot of other things done that the community sees as high priorities.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys considering any sort of ordinance or improvements to ordinances that may come about because of this public comment. I would just like you to know that I stand firm on as a citizen of this community and the surrounding communities, that I do have the right to pursue that occupation under the law. And I would like the council member, the commissioners, to notice and take note and put this on a high priority, because I just feel that an individual's right to pursue his occupation is extremely important and should be placed, hopefully, at the top of the agenda. Thank you.
Message received. Thank you
Thanks
both
so much.
for your time on the phone and for being here tonight, Giuseppe.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature? Questions or comments of a general nature with respect to any items not appearing on our agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will move to item 5, council member reports. I'll start with Commissioner Barnett tonight. Mr. Barnett,
Thank you, Mayor.
items you'd like to report out?
I do have a couple, bear with me for a minute here. First of all, this is our last meeting until Thanksgiving comes and goes. And so I want to take a minute to wish everybody in town a happy Thanksgiving. Hope people are able to spend time with those they love, and in particular for those that are traveling, I encourage you to travel safe, because we all want to see you back. After Thanksgiving, Friday, November 29th, Saturday, November 30th, and Sunday, December 1st, Downtown Management Corporation is sponsoring the Gingerbread Festival. It's 3 days of lots of fun all around gingerbread men. There's a gingerbread hunt, story time at the library. Our tree lighting ceremony will be Friday at 4:30. A variety of contests, all incorporating the gingerbread celebration and the small business Saturday, are going to be going on, and it's another great opportunity to come down to our community and our downtown and see the heart of our community thriving and have a little fun. So I hope you'll all participate in that. On a slightly more somber note, obviously, I'm sure there's nobody in town that is unaware of this week's terrible weather situation. I guess it was Sunday downstate. We're reminded again kind of the fragility of life, and everything we own is truly temporary. Literally, it's here today and gone tomorrow. A couple of folks in town, John and Tony Benish, are involved with Cook Illinois Corporation, the school bus company, and they are putting together a little bit of a relief effort. And so this is sort of a hometown-grown relief effort that I'm hoping folks will try and participate in. So I'll read this once, and then I'll read a piece of it again. Friday, November 22nd, at 5305 Park Avenue in Downers Grove, there's going to be school buses, and they're there to be loaded up with supplies to go down to the relief downstate. It's the same kind of list I'm sure we've all seen before. Joplin, Missouri probably is still on folks' minds. But everything that you can think of is stuff that they need now, our fellow state residents need. Pillows, soap, cleaning supplies, trash bags, tools, rakes, shovels, batteries, gloves, mops, towels, blankets, water, non-perishable food, granola bars, canned food, can openers, duct tape. I love duct tape. It solves everything. First aid kits, toothbrushes, toothpaste, everything that you can think of, everything that's in your home that you take for granted every day is literally gone. People's whole homes are missing, and they need help. And so again, Friday, November 22nd, 5305 Park Avenue in Downers Grove, from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. If you've got anything that you think would be helpful along those lines, drop it off there. A couple of guys in town are going to make sure it gets to those that need it downstate, and it's just one way that we can try and step up and help others that are less fortunate than us right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well said. And having met the mayor of Joplin, Missouri, when I was out in Seattle, she gave a presentation about all the devastation that was literally rained down upon her community and the massive rebuilding efforts that were only made possible by the kindness and contributions and support from not only those in Missouri, but from all across the country and all across the world. I would echo all your comments about any of those who can help. The rebuilding starts now, and of course we're all terribly saddened by the loss of life that was experienced. Thank God it wasn't more, but with the help of many, many other people, even towns like Joplin, Missouri can rebuild and move on. So thank you for sharing that with everyone. Commissioner Olson?
No report.
Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. This past Friday, I had the opportunity to go to the fire department's awards and promotion ceremony. It was great to see the next step in so many careers. We saw Brett Mowry be promoted to lieutenant. 6 folks became firefighter paramedics, and we have 4 new probationary firefighters that are starting their time here in Downers Grove and looking forward to long careers. We also had some award recipients. It was great to be able to celebrate with them and share that evening and see the next steps in what hopefully are long and dedicated and prosperous careers here in Downers Grove. Our firefighters obviously are, along with our police force, at the very cutting edge of public service. Now they're on the ground. They see folks when they're in their hours of need. Now, not unlike what Commissioner Barnett was just describing downstate. So we thank them for their service, and I want to thank them for allowing me to share it with them. It was a great family atmosphere. So many folks had kids with them, and one of them was kind of pushing around the chair next to me that had been reserved for Manager Fieldman, who was standing in the back with his kids. So it was really a great time. I too want to say that my thoughts and prayers are with the folks downstate in Indiana and in Michigan who were affected by the severe weather, and want to wish everybody a happy, safe, and healthy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rankin?
I've mentioned this before, but this is the season of people going out of town for Thanksgiving. So there is a form on the Village of Downers Grove website for a vacation watch, and you can fill it out if you're going to be out of town and drop it off at the police department. They can make sure that your house is safe, and they'll drive by and you notate, if you have people coming to check on animals or what vehicles will be in the driveway. So I think it's a good idea, and if you're going to be out of town, make sure you fill it out and drop it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, just to echo what Commissioner Rankin said, that is very true. They do come around, and I had an embarrassing experience with the cleaning lady coming on the day she wasn't supposed to be there, so police did a great job, and they definitely do what they say they're going to do. In addition to what Commissioner Barnett reported out on regarding the gingerbread, we have our annual tree lighting ceremony coming up on Friday, November 29th at 4:30. The mayor and Santa will be pushing the button to turn the bright lights on, displaying all the homemade ornaments made by the local children. If you have an opportunity to stop by prior to 4:30, at 4 o'clock, there'll be complimentary cookies and cider in the train station at Main Street. So hopefully all can come and participate. And Mayor, you've got to hug a tree to make sure it's excellent weather again. In addition to the tree lighting, wouldn't be the holiday season if I didn't ask all those that are residents, non-residents, visitors, to please do your Christmas shopping here in our wonderful town, Downers Grove. We have a lot of great stores, a lot of great businesses that can help fill your Christmas wish lists for those that you're shopping for. On behalf of myself and my family, I want to wish everyone a very happy, safe Thanksgiving. And if you're traveling, be safe. If you're local, plan to see us on Friday, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Neustadt?
Thank you, Mayor. Since we're on Thanksgiving, on Saturday, November 30th, you can recycle your used turkey fryer oil right here at the Village Hall parking lot. Of course, you'll be extremely careful when using your turkey fryer and let the oil cool completely, and you can bring it back here between the hours of 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. Right back here in the parking lot where the electronics recycling takes place. The used oil will be turned into clean burning biofuels that will be used for our fleet services building. A couple other things, Mayor. Yesterday, Commissioner Jose and I were able to attend the Midwestern University Clinical Building, I think that's the name of it, their open house. They were gracious enough to invite community members and folks from around town to see what they have there. They not only have a dentistry section, but they now have a audiology department, a speech pathology department, a family practice section, and they'll even have an eye clinic. It was very interesting to note that they do practice on patients, as well as there's some robotic type stuff there that they use, but they offer services to residents and non-residents, visitors, to come to their clinic at a reduced rate to allow the students to practice on live patients. So it's a great opportunity for those who may need dental, eye, ear, family practice, all sorts of other options are available there at the Midwestern Clinic. It's a beautiful building. As we've all seen with some of the other Midwestern campus buildings, they certainly know how to build and decorate and create an environment not only for their students but for their guests. It's a striking building. And last, Mayor, I was able to attend the Village of Downers Grove tabletop training exercise hosted by, or put on by Mary Pratt and Shannon Gillette. Mary Pratt is our Office of Emergency Management Director, and Shannon is a police lieutenant. Through my work, I was able to be invited to a scenario-based training seminar where 20 other partners and municipalities, school district, park district, churches, I believe the park district was there and was at the Park Rec Center. It was a somber training event because it was about an active shooter in a school. And as many of you know, I work for the school district and I'm in schools every day. But the experience of the training exercise was to see how all these different entities come together to learn, to train, to discuss what possibly could happen. The best takeaway was that the 20 participants and 20 different partnerships were able to share information. They were able to use some operational feedback and give it to each other. And in the end, I think that our community is a better place because these folks are training all the time on these type of situations. And we hope, of course, that we would never have to use that training. But knowing that in an emergency situation, our first responders as well as our other municipal partners are ready and able to help out when needed. So it was a great event. The feedback was very positive from others, including someone from Midwestern that I spoke with last night, said that he had been to a number of these tabletop exercises and this was by far the best that he had attended. It was organized, it was well put together, had all the right people at the table. And that's what would be needed in a unified command situation if one of these situations were to happen. So thank you for that. Also, as well as my colleagues have said, happy Thanksgiving to all. And remember that the Bonfield Express is happening here on Thanksgiving morning in Downers Grove. I won't put a plug in for that other one in Elmhurst, but it's been around for a little bit longer. You can figure out the name. It's called Turkey Trot, but it's not that big a deal.
And in fact, there are just 8 days, 13 hours, 4 minutes, and 16 seconds until the kickoff of the 10th annual Bondfield Express 5K. What better way to start your Thanksgiving morning than to spend it with about 5,000 or 6,000 of your closest friends? I sure will, although I'll be maybe about 20 minutes behind Commissioner Olson, I'm sure. Great event, great way for everyone to come together, the downtown, and hopefully we'll have some good weather for that as well, because that's a terrific race that we do here in the community. They're celebrating their 10th anniversary, and soon they're going to reveal what this year's shirt color is. I can't wait for that. There's a lot of money running on that right now, I hear. So I'll say the rest of my comments and holiday wishes for a little bit later. Let's then come to item 5 on our agenda. Item 6 on our agenda, public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight. That'll take us to item 7 on our agenda, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda tonight? Seeing as there are none, any questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Newstack.
Sorry, just a quick one. You know, this application for a grant from the Department of Homeland Security for the thermal imaging cameras. Chief Jackson, who's here tonight, was holding on to me at one point in a live fire demonstration, showing I kind of wanted to get out of the building, I think. And Chief,
I can't imagine why.
he was showing me the thermal imaging camera, and obviously it's a piece of equipment that is used for a lot of operational uses in the fire department. But the time we saw, we were in a fully blacked out room with smoke, and you could see an image coming through. It turned out to be another firefighter in their turnout gear, and you could see the reflection perfectly in the thermal imager. And it's great to hear that we're getting an upgrade and update to have the most technology advanced version of these cameras, because they're a very, very important part of the fire department's use. So glad to see us getting a great grant and being available, having a grant writer to submit these applications for us. Thank you, Mayor.
Terrific, thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the council with respect to any of the items on the consent agenda? Hearing none, may I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passed unanimously. It brings us to item 8, our active agenda. We have no items on our active agenda tonight, so we will go right to item 9, our first reading or our workshop agenda, where we entertain items for presentation and discussion purposes only and potential action at a later point in time. We have 4 different items on our first reading or workshop agenda tonight. As is customary, we turn the items over for presentation to Village Manager David Fieldman. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. The first item up for consideration is an ordinance amending stormwater utility fees for 2014. This is a proposal that would increase those fees by 6.4%. This is an agenda item we've been talking about actively as part of our budget process dating back to October. This is consistent with the recently approved FY14 budget. And on a related note, the next item, which you can also feel free to talk about at the same time, is an ordinance amending the water rates for 2014. That's a 7% increase that is less than our original long-range plan for fee increases for water due to some economies of scale we've achieved in our water operations. And this fee increase is also consistent with the recently approved FY14 budget. We are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments with respect to, well, as long as you've introduced both of them, items 9A and B on our first reading agenda, the proposed increases to the stormwater utility fee and the proposed increases to the water utility fee for 2014 from the audience, if I didn't make that clear. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, commissioners and staff, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Middaw, and I wanted to talk about the proposed rates for the stormwater utility. As some background on that, I would like to mention that in 1971, the Novotny company prepared a comprehensive drainage improvement report for the village of Downers Grove. And one of their conclusions was the total cost of upgrading the storm drainage system for those portions of Prentice Creek St. Joseph Creek and Lacey Creek watersheds within the Downers Grove planning area is in excess of $14 million. It would have been nice if we had actually carried through that plan and had put that $14 million to work at the time, but we didn't. One of the points that they made was that this plan that they proposed had 4 phases to it. The first phase for implementation of the stormwater drainage improvements consists of acquiring or reserving land for perpetual use for stormwater retention. No subsequent phase of the stormwater drainage program will approach the importance of setting aside land for storm drain retention purposes. Without this land, the cost of providing storm sewers will be prohibitive, and flooding accompanied by property damage will make future developments unrealistic. Well, we're still working on that business of setting land aside, particularly land that's in the floodplain and in the floodways of the village, and I did want to congratulate the village on its action last week, in acquiring 3 parcels of land just downstream from Barth Pond. And earlier this year, you did also acquire some land in the watersheds of Lacey Creek associated with flooding, and those lands will also be very significant and useful in providing for stormwater retention and improvement of our drainage. But it's kind of late in that game, and you're doing the best you can. I think there is more that can be done in the village, and I encourage the village and the staff particularly to continue to make recommendations of that nature to you. But that's not the issue tonight. The issue tonight is one of the new procedure by which you've established a funding source for doing the stormwater management in the community. And I think it's a very timely and useful funding source, the stormwater utility. There is something about this proposal for the rates. As I understand it, the stormwater utility was established last year with a certain initial rate, and as I read the background material for your decision on the rate this year, I've come across a paragraph that I'd like to repeat, that the study on which the stormwater utility is based recommended establishing fees to pay for operations, maintenance, and capital improvements. And that is that eventually all 3 of those categories would be paid for out of the stormwater utility. The initial proposal for the rate was that you wouldn't pay for the existing bond, the bond that was issued in 2008. The annual payments for the 2008 stormwater issuance were not included in the annual payments advocated by the study. The study recommended an 11% increase in the fees over 15 years to reach the level of maintenance and future capital needs recommended by the Stormwater Master Plan. So the village established fees for this year based on the idea that you would pay for not only the stormwater management and operations, but also the debt service on the 2008 bond, fully shifting all the stormwater costs to the utility and away from the property tax. That's good, I think. But when considering these two components, both the payment for the 2008 bond and the ongoing management and operation of the maintenance and operation of the system, the staff has come to recommend not an 11% increase this year, but a 6.4% increase. I think that is certainly very economical, and I really am delighted that the staff thinks that they can accomplish all that needs to be done on that basis. But I think to try to reach the 15-year goal of being able to pay for all of our operations and future capital needs out of this, it seems unlikely that you'll be able to keep the rate of increase from year to year this low, because the original study recommended that you'd need a 11% increase for each of those near years. So we're losing ground, and compared to the study, it's hard for me to see how we're going to have adequate funds. And certainly I encourage the council not to reduce further the staff recommendation, but to support at least a 6.4% increase in the fees for this coming year. That's what I wanted to add to the discussion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with you 100%. Although there are some unique factors, I think, for 2014 that allow us to do something less than the recommended 11%, and I do know that every year this topic will be revisited based on what the actual historic circumstances have been and updated information in terms of projections. But your point is well taken, Dr. Goodman, is that given that this is treated like a utility, much like the water fund, where we know what our costs are going to be, or at least we can reasonably project them, it's not rocket science to back into what the increases are going to be in order to make sure that the funds are there to do the capital, the operation, and the maintenance necessary to properly deliver the services. That's why the recommendations for the water increases are what they are. But again, this is something that we can estimate, or the study will say what they should be based on projections and estimates and assumptions. Every year we get a little bit more information because we have another year of history, and we look what the circumstances are right there. I would be in support of the 11% because of the study, but we do have some circumstances available to us for 2014 that are somewhat unique to that period of time that I think allow for something a little bit different, which is why I think the 6.4% is okay. But I think going forward, yes.
Just a point of clarification, it's the same raw dollar amount increase. Before, when we didn't shift over the $1.1 million in debt service payments, we needed a certain dollar amount. Well, now that we increased the base by adding $1.1 million to the utility, it's the same increase. So 11% on the plan equals 6.4% on what we actually rolled out. It's the same dollar amount, it is the same number, it's the same plan. It's just divided over a different base.
Thank you for that clarification. Although going forward, I think the point is well taken. Sorry, questions or comments? Anyone else? Questions or comments from the audience with respect to this item? Questions or comments from members of the council with respect to this item? Commissioner Rankin?
We've talked about this quite a bit, and we've heard from the public, and I've deliberated a lot. I think the cost share program is a great idea, but I think it may not be the only solution. Some of the nonprofits, I don't think that they can really take on the cost of a significant capital project to reduce their stormwater. So I spoke with Dave right before the meeting, and he, if other people are interested, may be able to gather some information. And I'd like us to possibly consider that the nonprofits would always be, or I'd like us to see the numbers. If we set the nonprofits at 20% or 10% below all of the other payers, so their rate was always lower, that would mean they would still be payers, but it would maybe provide them some relief. We heard from many about the impacts that this was having on their budgets, and I'd just like us to possibly consider that. So maybe if we could have additional information to see how that impacts us financially before next meeting.
We'd be happy to provide that information. We have that readily available.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments from council? Commissioner Barnett?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm struggling to be supportive of this just because I think it's bad structure. I really would like to see, you know, and I'm saying this, probably it's a little bit of a windmill jousting exercise, I suppose, but I'd like to see us have the NFPs out. You know, one of the big things that was, not trying to recreate history or use it as a club, but this process was as well thought out and certainly debated over a long period of time, which is all good. But it also was, I think, overstated. Some things were overstated, and I'm sure I was part of that. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but from a process standpoint, we got pretty excited about, you know, cost shifting and the big positive impact it was going to have on our residents, and the fact that we needed, you know, we certainly felt we needed to treat people fairly from a legal standpoint, and some of those things, the magnitude of them, I think, is just really diminished as we've gone through this first year of seeing how it shakes out and learning more and listening to people. And that, you know, the last 2 weeks ago, I think it was, when I asked finally for that last pie chart, you know, if they're out, there's still a 20-some% reduction in the burden on our residents. It's not like all of a sudden the value of shifting is off of our residents and they're hammered back with 76% of the cost. They're just not. It's, do they get 25% reduction or 21% reduction? And the cost share, I say all this stuff, and I don't want to sound so negative towards my colleagues who I know are not seeing this the same way as I am, because I do appreciate the various comments and efforts that were made to try and find ways to soften, you know, with some of the wording that we were used to ramp up the cost share program. But, you know, it's $300,000 of revenue from not-for-profits, and we're giving 100 of it back right out of the gate to the school districts, and then we're talking about making the cost share 200, and pretty soon it's like a wash, and yet we're putting these guys through the ringer and changing their world. So I would be one to support a higher increase to keep that net dollar amount Dave was talking about, with the removal of the NFPs as one of the payers. I don't know if anybody has any interest in that at all, but I do think that the work that we're going to do is appropriate, and I appreciate the fact that everybody's sticking to the idea that we want to get this work done, because it is necessary work. And absent the idea of deep six in the whole utility, which is not going to make anybody happy, I think that moving the NFPs out is something that really is a pretty minimal impact to the remaining balance payers. They'll still receive much of the benefit of having the utility, but could do a world of good for our not-for-profit community. So that's where my head is on this right now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Olson?
I think my views on this, as many of my colleagues, in a similar vote as many of my colleagues, my views are pretty well known on this. I cannot support a 6.4% increase in the stormwater utility fee this year. When I asked residents for their support earlier this year to be elected to this body, something was discussed heavily, and I discussed it with residents from throughout the community. And I think there is clearly a mixed reaction to the stormwater utility. There are clearly folks in the not-for-profit community that we've heard from in force over the past several months. There are people in our community that maybe we have not heard from that might not be so supportive of the utility, but they haven't yet come out and made those views known in significant numbers as the not-for-profits have. And in this year, where we're still adjusting to this new fee, we're still in a transition process, I've stated to my colleagues and I've stated publicly that I can support nothing greater than an inflationary increase in this year's fee. I do want to address one point. One point that's been made significantly is if we don't do this, we're losing all this ground and it's going to be a crisis in future years. Well, my response to that is twofold. First, we're spending down bond proceeds this year. I think we have a significant amount of money still in bond proceeds from the previous bond, previous years. There's no new bonding, and we have yet to spend that down. And to me, it's very important, and I agree that it's very important to conduct these projects and to make these improvements. But this 6.4% increase versus a more inflationary type increase is not going to make a significant difference this year in the number of projects that we can do. And the other point I'd like to make is just that in shifting from the property tax model, paying for stormwater projects, to the utility model, we're generating a significant amount more revenue than we were under the previous system. And I think that that is important to note, that while we've reduced the burden on our residents, on many of our residents, we've shifted that around in a arguably more equitable manner. We have also done so in a way that we are raising more revenue than we were previously for the utility, for stormwater projects. And I think that that is an important fact to note in this process. At this point, I think my colleagues are fairly clear, and we've said a lot of the same things over and over, week after week. But I just want to make it clear to my colleagues and clear to the folks both here and at home that where I stand, where my thinking is on this. And of course, as I've noted before, this is my position in this year. My position in future years is certainly subject to change, and I'm not saying that I support an inflationary increase every year for the next 15 years, but I think in this year, given what we've heard from the not-for-profits, given what we've heard from the community, I don't believe it is appropriate at this time to make such a large adjustment, or what I view as a large adjustment for our residents, business owners, not-for-profits, and other fee payers. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by pointing out that, as Manager Fieldman helpfully pointed out, the 6.4% increase is actually consistent with the plan. And I think it's important that, especially in this next year, being the second year of the utility, that we stick with the plan. The reason we have it is that we had a study that demonstrated that we have a multi-million-dollar gap each year in stormwater funding. And the council made a few years ago a decision that this was untenable, and it's important to maintain the infrastructure we have so that we can deal with the problems we have. I think it was Commissioner Durkin who's talked about now having too small a bucket for all the water that we put in it. So the first step is making sure that the bucket doesn't have any cracks in it before we then go ahead and expand the bucket to what exactly we need. There's been some discussion of the size of the increase and whether it's 6.4 or whether it's 10 or whether it's inflationary. I think it's also important to note that the 6.4% increase equates to approximately 54 cents a month for the typical residential property here in Downers Grove. While 6.4% might sound like a big increase, when you put it in real dollar terms, 54 cents a month, not as big as you might think. With that in mind, we have the option of the cost share program. Of course, Commissioner Rankin brought up the idea of maybe tiering the utility, which is something that I'd like to see more information about, and I'm glad staff will bring that forward. But I think the cost share program is very attractive to me, and I'm looking forward to that because it not only helps reduce the burden on NFPs, which we're all concerned about, but it also helps mitigate the stormwater problems that we currently have. It's sort of your quintessential win-win. Now, they're getting a reduction in the burden on them. We're seeing a reduction in the burden on all of us as a village to deal with the stormwater problems that we have. So I stand in support of the 6.4% increase because it's consistent with the plan of taking care of our infrastructure and making sure that we're having measurable steps toward our goal of maintaining it to the extent that we need to. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, Commissioner Neustadt?
Thank you, Mayor. to go in line with Commissioner Jose's point, you know, we've spent millions and millions of dollars on our infrastructure so far before the utility was in place. And the 6.4 number equates to the operations and maintenance of the infrastructure that we have, plus a couple of projects that we can throw in there for 2014. We all of us up here know, and many of our residents know, that we've just shifted through our long-range plan the ability to pay for our roads, which fell into disrepair over time because money wasn't being put aside for those repairs. Our stormwater system needs to be maintained and operated in a way that's designated by the engineers. We have an opportunity now with this 6.4% increase, which I do support, to continue along with that as the plan designates. And each year we get to have this conversation again. And each year things will change. Each year we may or may not have bond proceeds. Each year we will be able to set this rate. The not-for-profit conversation has been in this chamber many, many times, and I think it's very interesting to hear some of the comments, because really, if you look at all of the users, we've heard mostly from not the not-for-profits as a whole, but the faith-based community as mostly. I think that there's a lot of folks in town that support the utility. I think a lot of people that I've spoken with, once they understand it, and once they're described what the utility does, they do see the benefits, because we all benefit from a stormwater infrastructure that works. We often make decisions based on input from residents and organizations, and I just want us to be very careful that we're not being influenced by one component of the payer of this fee. We all knew that this was going to be a big change for all of us, residents, businesses, not-for-profits, municipalities that are in our village. It was a no. We're in that first year. We understand what's happening. The utility has worked very well. We've been getting paid. We know that the revenue's coming in. In order for this village to make these repairs and to make these projects work, we need revenue. This is the path that we've decided, and I think it's a positive path that we're still in complete control of and can adjust the rates as needed. I support the 6.4% increase because it is a little bit less than what was described by the plan. Often we jump right up to the high numbers, but in this case, I think it's a good way to bring down the cost. As Commissioner Jose says, per month, it's really not a whole heck of a lot, but it allows us to start to plan. And we all know how well planning works for our village. Long-range planning, long-range financial planning has worked very well to get us to a point where this year's budget, we really only talked about one thing, and that's this. Because of the long-range plan, because the stormwater utilities creates part of that long-range plan, I think it's important to start a process of getting these rate increases in line so we can plan for the future and get our staff moving and our infrastructure ready to be maintained and operated in the way that it should. So I will be supporting the 6.4. Of course, always open to hear suggestions. Commissioner Rankin's idea tonight about a different level for not-for-profits. The only question I would have is that the entire not-for-profit segment, or is there segments within the not-for-profit? I think we've had that question before, and how do you separate who is, who are we looking for? Is it the whole pot piece of that pie, or?
Well, let's just be, just not to interrupt, but let's also just be clear in our nomenclature. We're not talking about not-for-profits, we're talking about tax-exempt parcels.
Sure. Correct.
Because not-for-profits is another category, it doesn't necessarily overlap with it. What we're talking about are tax-exempt parcels.
Which goes to my story about when there's a church service at Emmett's on Sunday mornings, do they become a not-for-profit?
Well, yeah,
But not because they're.
Right. We're talking about tax-exempt
Taxable
parcels that previously were exempt from a property tax, we're now paying a fee. So let's be clear on what we're talking about.
Well, let me just clarify. The reason I was grouping it all together was because I thought that it would be difficult to separate the churches from the nonprofits. So, and my numbers are not exact, and that's why I asked the village staff to verify them. But, 10% could be about $20,000 and 20% could be about $40,000. It's not a huge impact to the budget, but it would provide relief. And when Commissioner Jose is saying 54 cents to a homeowner, that's true, probably. But like, for example, some of these churches are 21 ERUs. So, it's more of an impact to them, I think, than a single homeowner.
Mayor, I want to pick up on something Commissioner Olson said.
Go ahead.
I
It's a
just-
workshop. I'm going to let Commissioner Durkin get his
I'm sorry.
say here, but go
Sure,
ahead.
Go jump
No,
in.
no, go ahead.
I was in workshop mode. So
I'm in
I
the
was-
super minority, so it's fine, don't worry.
just for those, kind of for the record and for those watching at home, what you're seeing up here is necessary and part of what we have to do. And lest anybody think this is an easy decision for anybody, a little history just to put things in perspective. We have a $44 million operating budget roughly. And when the, trying to pick appropriate language for a council person, when things got difficult a few years ago, we, I was going to use something with a fan, but we made some changes that caused a lot of, hand-wringing and angst and difficulty, and that was like $4.5 million. And so to David's kind of following up, we've approximately $3.5 million that we're receiving in revenue from this. But the goal, to Jeff's point, the engineers, what they tell us we should be doing is like $6.5 million. So for some perspective, this is not, I'm not trying to pick on you, Greg, it's not 54 cents. It's a hell of a lot of money as it relates to the total village operating budget, and it relates to the decisions we make about what we should and shouldn't be doing and how we should and shouldn't be doing it. It's big money. And so just some magnitude I want to throw in there, Martin. It doesn't speak to whether 6.4 is right or whether the utility setup is right, but it's big dollars to cover, as Jeff points out, things that we didn't do when we should have, as Gordon points out, probably decades ago. And so, but it's not a choice anymore as to whether or not we generate this revenue. So for those at home that may be watching, this discussion may be boring you, but it's not a matter of, well, if I didn't have a utility, I wouldn't be paying. It's not like that at all. We need $6.5 million, hell or high water, to put a pun into the stormwater utility, in the not too distant future, to do the things that we absolutely have to be doing that we should have been doing long ago. So, sorry, Mayor, I thought that was appropriate to throw in because there's a lot of back and forth up here.
No, I think that's one thing everyone agrees on, is we have projects that need to be done and they need to be paid for. The money's coming from somewhere. We're debating where it's coming from and how it's being allocated, but I don't think there's any disagreement from anyone that we have stormwater needs that need to be attended to, and we're going to do that. Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, I do support the stormwater utility fee because I didn't vote on it when it originally came about. But I did say during the time when we voted on it that I was not in favor of the outlined proposed increases that the third-party vendor had told us that we should be doing. And with that, I agree with Commissioner Olson that a 3% increase is more in line and would definitely not be supporting a 6.4. I am intrigued with what Commissioner Rankin has brought up in regards to some sort of service fee reduction for the faith-based, if that's what you're going with, organizations. Because when we, as a council, previous councils, when we had eliminated a lot of the non-core services, the faith-based organizations came before us and said that we'll take on that. And when I voted in favor of the stormwater utility fee, I didn't really remember, nor did I recall all of the stuff that those faith-based organizations took on, including some non-for-profits. And if I did recall that, I would have had this conversation, or hopefully we as a collective body would have had the conversation in light of the time that we talked about and we passed this service or this utility fee. And I understand there's needs. I understand that we need to pay for it. I truly understand that. But I just think that we as a council, in light of what they have done for us with the non-core services that we cut, that they took on, I think we owe it to them to still discuss that. So I don't know where that leads us, if we have to have this passed by a certain date, or if there can be some additional time that we can talk about it instead of just waiting until the first meeting in December, if this were to go on that agenda then. So I'm interested in further discussion on that.
Well, it's a workshop, so we'll see where that goes. Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. Just real quick, I didn't want to leave hanging out there any impression that my comments and Commissioner Barnett's comments were necessarily all that dissimilar. We're in agreement that we have a stormwater problem that we need to address. I mentioned in my initial comments that there's a multi-million-dollar gap, and I think everyone up here is dedicated to filling that gap. My comment on the 54 cents, which is accurate, it's in the staff report, it was simply to illustrate the fact that the impact on each individual resident is a certain measurable amount, and I think it's a fairly reasonable increase when you look at it in that category. I think Commissioner Rankin's right. Once you start multiplying the number of ERUs, obviously the impact is larger. But I guess it goes to the idea of many hands make for small work. With my 54 cents and your 54 cents, sooner or later we get to the money we need and we take care of the problems that we face. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. A couple of issues that are being talked about here. One is the amount of increase for all payers into the stormwater utility for fiscal 2014. And I think I've said enough on this topic at multiple meetings. I won't repeat myself. I am fine with the 6.4% for fiscal 2014. Like others, and as is contemplated, we need to revisit that afresh in 2015. So enough on that topic. The other issue has to do with whether or not certain payors, current payors in the stormwater utility structure should be exempted categorically. And this is where, first, let me be very clear, I am not unsympathetic to some of the comments and requests that have been made primarily by, and I want to be clear by this, a relatively small minority of tax-exempt parcels. While we may have had a number of members who attend organizations that are located on those tax-exempt parcels, members of a parish or members of a church, what we're talking about, put a fine point on it, is a parcel that generates a lot of stormwater runoff, and for that reason has a fee that is larger than a single-family residence most typically. Now, we're talking about tax-exempt parcels and ones that previously paid no property taxes, still don't pay any property taxes, but now under utility fee system are paying a fee that is tied to the amount of runoff generated by that property, and a relatively small number of them. We actually talk about parcels. It's probably less than a dozen parcels have come here and repeatedly requested that they be exempted from this utility fee because of the impact upon their organizations that happen to be on those tax-exempt parcels. And I just want to ask a quick question of staff. The information that was given last week with respect to the budget, there were stormwater fees for a handful of tax-exempt properties that faith-based organizations are located on. Those were annual stormwater fees that were listed?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to put this into perspective because we're talking about a relatively small number of parcels who have come before us and raised issue. Just to give it an order of magnitude, Divine Savior, the annual stormwater fee for fiscal 2013 is about $4,400. St. Joseph's, $3,100. St. Mary's, $4,500. And there might be some that are more than that. In fact, I know there are some, and there might be some that are less than that. But just to put it on a perspective, it's an annual cost. Now, is that a cost at that tax-exempt parcel? Is a new cost to them above and beyond what they had to pay the previous year? You betcha. And I understand that we've all heard, and we've not been unsympathetic to the fact that that's an additional cost to those organizations, along with water, which we're raising tonight by 7%, and other things that they will have to pay. We understand that. But my real point here is I have a real problem with a categoric exemption of all tax-exempt parcels. All of them, which would, if we were to exempt all tax-exempt parcels, that would mean a reduction in revenue of about how much?
$306,000.
$306,000. I really don't see why we would take $306,000 out of our revenue stream when we're talking about a dozen parcels, which if we added them up, is nowhere near that. What I would rather do, and what I have embraced and recommended and pled with the relatively few parcels owners who have come before us, is let's focus on how we can help you help yourself and reduce the impact upon you of your $4,400, your $3,100, or your $4,500 as an example. So my question to the rest of the council is, can we be more surgical about this? Why would we exempt all tax-exempt parcels when there's obvious a desire here to address a certain number, I think as Commissioner Neustadt said, a vocal minority who has raised a not illegitimate concern. I get that, and I think we're sympathetic to it, and I think we've said over and over again that we would like to explore and will explore and are exploring ways in which to mitigate and overcome barriers to allow them to help reduce that impact upon themselves, and there are ways to do that. I mean, a lot of these are parcels that have a lot of impervious space, and there are certainly things that could be done there to change that that would then benefit them, not only in terms of the runoff, which benefits their more immediate area, but also would help them ideally reduce the fee that they would have to pay. That's what I'd like to focus on. I don't think we ought to just put $300,000 aside for all tax-exempt parcels. We should focus on the relatively small number of parcels that have raised issue with this. And by the way, while we have had packed chambers here, representing representatives of faith-based, certain faith-based organizations that are located on some of those tax-exempt parcels, Commissioner Newstadt's absolutely right. I don't know if anyone else has been looking at their email. I'm sure you have. You've been getting the same emails and inquiries I have. The community's not in agreement on this point. There are certainly a number of people out there who don't agree that we should be exempting any tax-exempt parcels.
Why are we exempting them?
Why are we exempting them?
You keep referring to tax-exempt parcels. They're exempt from taxes. Why?
Because that's the way the structure was set up.
I know.
Why are they not exempt from water?
Why are they not paying their fair share, if that's the issue?
The structure of the stormwater utility, and I can take this back to the very history if that's
Sure,
if that's
it's a
necessary.
workshop. But you're sitting there saying we've only got 12 people, and why would we just exempt a small number of people from paying their part of the bill? And it's only $4,400. Why are we exempting them at all?
Why are we exempting them from property taxes?
Why are we exempting them from paying for the services they receive? That is a burden on all the residential properties.
All right, so you're talking about other services.
I'm talking about the point of the not-for-profits being included in this has been framed up by the bulk of this council as equitable, fair, and de minimis. And none of those fly with any of the other services we provide for our residents. Every dollar that is spent when we waive a fee for an application for a not-for-profit, every dollar that is spent when we provide fire service for a not-for-profit, I shouldn't say that, tax-exempt parcel, every one of those dollars is a shift of cost burden to our residents.
Yes.
And so where is the equity in this?
The equity is very clear. We have two ways of approaching paying this. We could have raised property taxes, which would again have exempted the tax-exempt parcels from paying even more of the share, which would have necessarily shifted the burden onto others, which we all recognize. I understand that it could be 20%, 21%, 19%. We can play around with percentages all night long. It's a structural issue. We could have just done it the way we did it before. We could also change, or we could change. And we can be innovative. And we can try to be more equitable, we can try to be more transparent, we can try to be more accountable, and we can try to be more responsible. And those are the reasons why the utility passed in the first place. And yes, from day one, the whole concept of utility is to spread out the cost of managing stormwater amongst more payers.
None of those
tied to the runoff that their properties generate.
None of those things are dependent.
Not the activity that takes place on their property.
None of those things are dependent upon the tax-exempt parcels inclusion in the utility.
You could exempt anybody from this and make your same argument.
Right, but not anybody is out there with an existing structure of their own financing and how they run their operations that are dependent. Not anybody is out there contributing to our community. Not anybody is in the same situation. Those that are tax-exempt for a very specific reason, and it is not, frankly, our decision. They're tax-exempt by powers much larger than this day.
That's right.
And so all of those things you talk about equity and fairness and sustainability and innovation and creative, are all, absolutely 100%, all still successfully accomplished by eliminating the tax-exempt parcels from the stormwater utility. The utility does not need to go away to eliminate tax-exempt parcels.
And I know you're not saying that. And I don't disagree that could we take out $300,000, shift it around, and put it somewhere else? You betcha we could.
Still a 20% reduction for our residents.
You betcha, Commissioner. We could shift around whatever we want to shift around. But
So
my point is,
why is the $4,400 so important to get out of Divine Savior?
it's not so important to get out of Divine Savior, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm simply saying is I think the approach is overbroad to categorically exempt all tax-exempt parcels. We can't exempt all non-for-profits, by the way, just to be clear about that. We can only exempt tax-exempt parcels. Well, actually, we could exempt anybody we want. I mean, we could exempt people over 5'4" with brown eyes. I exaggerate to make a point.
Yeah, well,
But we
don't.
could. And it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference on the overall revenues either. But-
There's not much, we're not exempt on Emmets because they hold a church service either. Let's not exaggerate too much.
That wasn't my exaggeration, just for the record. The point is, the whole structure of the program is driven by parcels. So I'm going to focus on parcels.
Right.
The parcels that generate the most runoff, have the most impervious area, are the ones that pay the most money.
Right.
Now, it just so happens that there's a lot of parcels that also happen to have faith-based organizations on them that have big roofs and big parking lots. So that's why they have $4,400. And no, my point is, it's not so important for me to get $4,400 of Divine Savior. Anyone who's been listening to what I've been saying for the last 3 months must have heard, if they were paying attention, that how can we work with them to reduce that $4,400? So guess what? We get a better stormwater management system, and they have a lower impact upon them. That's all my point is. So let's focus on the relatively small issue at hand, rather than try to deal with it with a large, categoric, across-the-board sweeping change.
Yeah, that's a entirely reasonable.
That's all I'm saying.
I think it's entirely reasonable, Mayor, and like I tried to say earlier, I do appreciate people even speaking those kinds of words on the subject. I just also think, and I hope, you know what would be great would be if a year from now you guys could all tell me how wrong I am, because all of a sudden we're cranking out the cost share. But I'll speak to specifics, and that I can speak to. And when you're talking about 3 or 4 parcels worth of blacktop, yeah, it's a big burden on the stormwater system, no doubt. It's also a hundreds of thousands of dollars proposition to make any change in. It's not a rain barrel. It's big money, big engineering, big permitting. Sure, we can waive the permit fees, we can waive the application fees. We're gonna engineer it for them, we're gonna co-op purchase the bricks.
We can even
It's
assist
a
with
load of
financing.
money. It's an enormous amount of money. And I think it's unrealistic to think that any of these not-for-profits, whether it's, family shelter services, are going to just start ripping up parking lots and putting down permeable pavers because we give them a $500 a year credit.
I'm not prepared to reach that conclusion because none of those proposals have been discussed. All I've been asking, and I think it's a pretty simple request, is to sit down and talk about it.
What was the example you used? You wanted to get innovative with all this paved area. That's a pretty expensive proposition, Mayor.
Well, again, I don't want to talk about things in a hypothetical, jump to conclusions that must be $100,000. We don't know that. What we do know is we're talking about probably a dozen or less parcels, and we're talking a few $1,000s a year, which I absolutely, fully, completely sympathize and respect and understand is an additional significant burden to them in their perspective. No question about it.
It's like the cost of staff in some cases. The same
I'm
amount of money.
not debating that with you. I'm not debating the balance sheet of First United Methodist Church. That's not the point here. I really want to focus back on the structure of the program and about what we're talking about are parcels that generate a lot of runoff, tax exempt from property taxes, which under this system have to pay a fee, no different than they have to pay for water. We're just talking about raising water 7% tonight. I haven't heard a single commissioner up here say, for the not-for-profits or for the tax exempt parties, let's only raise it 3%. Why?
Because they have the ability to control their usage, that's why.
All I'm asking is for them is to work with us to help control the impact of the stormwater in their properties and also impact their stormwater fee. That's exactly what I'm asking for them to do.
And that's
I
why,
don't think it's
that's why you
unrealistic.
can't be so hypothetical with the magnitude of what that means. It doesn't mean install low-flow toilets. It means hundreds of thousands of dollars of paving changes. That's the kind of money we're talking about.
Maybe. Maybe.
Okay. Maybe I'll be wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
Maybe. All I'm saying is that let's focus on that first. Let's see whether it is hundreds of thousands of dollars. If there's a cost, if there's a barrier to entry that's really that high, then you know what, maybe we can look at something else. But right now we're talking about hypotheticals. I would like to actually sit down, talk about what can and can't be done. I know staff has already begun some of this, but as long as we're talking about categorical exemptions, there's not a whole lot of motivation to start working real seriously on those things. I'd like to deal with the specifics before we go to the broader issues. That's all I'm saying. I haven't foreclosed one way or the other. I just think that a more logical, precise approach would be preferable over a categorical one. That's all. And continue to encourage everyone to help us help them in that respect. I actually did have one other point I was going to get to before you jumped in there. The idea of a tiered fee or something like that, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I appreciate you introducing it, Commissioner Rankin. I have some concerns about it. Maybe we can take a look at what that looks like. I also have some other concerns I'd like to talk about with staff from a slightly different perspective. And I'd also like to get some feedback, and maybe that's why we talk about it, as to how does the rest of the community feel about basically taking on that additional burden?
Well,
I don't know what the reaction would be if you were to stand out in the corner of Curtis and Main and ask 20 people at random, would you be willing to pay another even 54 cents or $1.50 or whatever it is, so that tax exempt parcels 1 through 612 don't have to pay as much? I don't know what the answer to that is.
well, one of my concerns that I mentioned to Manager Fieldman was just that I'd like to see how it affects the percentage of the pie. And that was
Right.
one of the other numbers that they,
Right.
he
But
said
let's
he
be
could
clear,
provide.
we can play around with the pie all day long. We can make it apple, cherry, or banana, but that's easy.
But when you're referring to someone else has to take up the burden, I mean, I'd like to see that as well.
I would
agree.
too, I would too. So it's an interesting concept, I'm not sure how I feel about it, I guess is my point on it. So just for clarification, so everyone knows where I stand, I'm fine with the 6.4. I'm not prepared at this point to endorse a categoric exemption of all tax exempt parcels from the stormwater utility fee. I think that there is still untread ground to pursue with trying to address the expressed concerns of a relatively few number of parcels. And again, I'm not undermining or in any way diminishing the importance of this issue to them. All of us fully understand that. Commissioner Olson. And we're doing a real workshop. This is great. Commissioner Olson.
Just get around the table.
I don't want to preclude any further discussion on the stormwater utility, but I did want to ask a question on the water utility. When we're talking about a 7% increase to the water utility, I know that that's a concern of our residents. Any type of significant cost increase like this, and any type is impactful to our residents, especially residents who are maybe on fixed incomes or other challenging circumstances. How much of this increase is unavoidable? And by that I mean, how much of this increase is coming down from Chicago and then from the DuPage Water Commission, and essentially we are just passing along this increase, not because we want to increase 7%, but because we have to in order to continue to buy water from the DuPage Water Commission and the City of Chicago, and them from the City of Chicago.
We don't have that information at our fingertips. We do have it, some of our staff members, so we can produce that information by the next meeting.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
I do have a question on the water.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, while you're researching it, can you also have staff research and see if the City of Chicago passed an ordinance granting free water to their faith-based organizations?
Yes.
I know that was something that was being passed around, and it got a lot of media about a year ago, but I never really saw if they passed it or not, or what they're doing with that.
No more takers? It's a workshop. We're not done with this topic. Are there any unresolved loose threads, open issues, questions that staff has based upon this robust discussion?
We'll get some more information, and we'll continue the discussion at our next council meeting in a few weeks.
All right, terrific, thank you.
Hey, I got one. It's a little bit of a rabbit trail, but has there been any further talk, there was a year and a half ago, about alternative sources for DWC's purchase? I think there's some North Shore communities that were looking at trying to be suppliers. Has there been any progress made? I mean, I guess that's real infrastructure progress other than just discussion. Has anybody done any pipe work to make that possible?
I think some work is being done. We'll have to research that to see what the status is. I think some in the north and some suburbs in the south.
All right, nothing further on that topic, and thank you everybody for the lively discussion and their comments. I think we're on, if I lost track, 9C is in Charlie.
Which is an ordinance rezoning property at 4245 Bel Air Lane. And here to present background information on this item is our Community Development Director, Tom DeBrenner.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Right away. Hit the wrong button. There we go. An ordinance has been prepared to permit a zoning ordinance map amendment to rezone the property at 4245 Bel Air Lane from R2 Single Family Residence to B3 General Services and Highway Business District, and we're looking for an approval on the December 3rd active agenda. This is the approximate location along Ogden Avenue. Bel Air is here. We'll take an aerial view of the property. The property itself is located here. Let me outline it in blue just to kind of highlight the property. It is currently zoned R2 residential. It is surrounded by property that is B3 to the east, south, and west. To the north is residential, and we're seeking to turn that red and make it compatible with the other business uses in the neighborhood closer to Ogden Avenue. This is a photograph of the site just prior to the Plan Commission hearing. A little bit of background: the property was annexed in 1972. The building itself has been around, I believe, since the 1950s, zoned commercial in the county. And when it came into the village, it was zoned R2, a residential district. However, it has always been a business use. This rezoning, when it comes into the village at R2, when it's a commercial use, that creates a legal non-conforming use. And in this case, it was an automobile repair shop through October 2011. Earlier this year, we received a submittal for a tool and die shop at this location. That is, in fact, a permitted use in B3. Making the property B3 would make the use conforming. That's something that we wanted to see there. We think it's consistent with the zoning ordinance. We think that it's consistent with the historic and intended use. All the bulk requirements are met. We think it's consistent with the comprehensive plan's desire to add commercial depth along Ogden Avenue. The Plan Commission considered their petition at their October 28th, 2013 meeting. They found that the rezoning request is compatible with the surrounding uses and zoning classifications, and that the request met the standards for rezoning in Section 28.1701 of the zoning ordinance. The Plan Commission recommended approval of the zoning ordinance map amendment by a 9-0 vote, and staff concurs. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments on this item from any members of the audience? Please.
Mr. Mayor, council members.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Ken Rathje, Rathje Planning Services in Downers Grove. I've been working with Greg Nosich, the owner of the property, since he was just beginning to look at the property. He was concerned that the property carried an R2 zoning, yet it had a commercial property. And partly because of my particular private knowledge of the property, or professional knowledge of the property, and partly because of research, we determined that this area had most likely been forced annexed in August 1972, prior to which time it carried a B4 zoning in DuPage County. The 1976 land use map, which had been amended a number of times, also showed this piece of property as being appropriate for commercial use. Apparently, and in conversation with planning staff last summer of 2012, it had been an inadvertent omission when the comp plan was approved in 2011. Just as backup information, I went looking also at the TIF legal description and TIF map, and this piece of property is included in the Ogden Avenue TIF. We're very appreciative of that the village took the bull by the horns on this proposed rezoning, and we'd be very supportive and appreciative if the council would see fit to have the property properly rezoned to B3. If you have any questions, I have a lot more information I can share with you, but I won't burden you with it if you don't want to know it.
Of that, I have no doubt. That you have more information. Thank you, I appreciate that additional information. Any other members of the audience who wish to comment on this item? Thank you, Mr. Radke.
Thank you.
Hearing none, questions, comments from members of the village council?
No.
Commissioner Neustadt.
Just quickly, this was noticed and public notice was given. There was no public input at the Plan Commission meeting and none yet here tonight, so I will be supporting this rezoning. I think it's a smart way to go.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions, comments? No. I'll just add that one thing that I think we've been saying collectively over time, doesn't matter who's been sitting up here since the Ogden Avenue Master Plan was put into place, is that the lot depths along Ogden Avenue are a challenge, and the current comprehensive plan specifically calls for when it makes sense and when opportunities present to do what we can to assist and facilitate the increasing depth of lots along Ogden Avenue to facilitate a more vibrant economic corridor. So for that reason principally, but all the others have been given, it makes perfect sense to me as well. Any final questions or comments? Hearing none. Thank you. I guess we'll go to our last item on the workshop agenda,
which is consideration of a motion accepting the Village of Downers Grove Architectural and Historical Survey Report. This is a high priority action item for this year, and Tom has background information on this report as well.
This is a motion to accept, as the village manager pointed out. We're looking for acceptance of the report on the December 3rd active agenda as well. There is a copy of the report. I have a full copy right here, and I'll just spend the next hour or so covering the, I'm kidding, we'll shorten that up.
Should we take our intermission now and come back and start this conversation? Or?
So last year, the village began preparation to complete the historic building survey of 4 areas within the village, and you can see them in the map shown here, but we'll zoom in on them in a second. The Village of Downers Grove is a certified local government, and certified local governments within the context of historic preservation are required to maintain an active historic building survey program, and this was really our entree into this venue. As a CLG, the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency awarded the village $15,000 in the form of a grant to help with the survey's costs. That amounts to a little bit better than half of the total cost of the survey and printing and everything else. The report does complete a high priority action item for the village. It also helps to maintain that CLG status, as I mentioned, and it complies in full with state grant requirements. There are the 4 areas that we looked at: Shady Lane Estates, E.H. Prince Subdivision, Denver and Woods, and then this kind of combination of Main and Maple. They were really chosen as potential candidates to have some, a good number of significant and contributing properties, and I'll explain in a minute what significant and contributing means, because that is the point of the exercise of the survey. But some of the findings that are out there, predominant building form, I should have put this in a question and let you guess first, but predominant building form is a bungalow. And really, I'm just talking about the 4 areas that were surveyed. It's not village-wide. Predominant form is the bungalow, and that's followed by a 4-square and ranch, pretty much a tie there. And then we've got some other examples as well of building forms. Predominant architectural styles, then, we extend from that, and number 1 by far is the Queen Anne style in these districts, followed by Neo Revival and Craftsman forms. These are all described at length, really, in the report, and I know that you've got a copy of it, and I do want to mention that the copy of the report is available online. It is one of those efforts where you click the download and then you walk away for a while and you come back, because it is a massive document with a lot of pictures, a lot of graphics. That's why it's data heavy. This is kind of an interesting graph for a planner or perhaps a historian, because it really tells us, it really lets us kind of watch the growth of these 4 areas in the village over the years, and it goes back, it starts here at about 150 years ago on the left-hand side, and then progresses to the right to the most recent decade. And then I highlighted 4 of the bars with arrows there, and really just to point out, these were periods of really significant amounts of construction in the village, residential construction in these 4 areas again. One was in that 1950s period, 50, 60 years ago. Another really significant growth period was in that 80 to 100 year ago period. And then actually the biggest, most productive period within these 4 areas was about 120 years ago. And we hope these are represent the ages of the homes that were surveyed. So this is a pretty interesting graphic, at least from my perspective. I think it really starts telling a story about historic preservation potential and landmarking potential in the village, in these neighborhoods. Some other survey findings, and this is really getting at the meat of what this document contains. What properties are significant, what properties are contributing, what properties are not contributing. And let me just highlight for a second the significant properties. When we call a property significant in this report, it's a building that's at least 50 years old and maintains a high distinction of architectural style or building type, and these properties really are pretty good candidates to be landmarked should that property owner, building owner want to pursue that. Contributing also is a building that's 50 years old or more and maintains a moderate to good degree of integrity. These properties, these buildings are probably not able to be individually landmarked, but they might contribute towards a neighborhood or a district concept should that be something that neighborhood pursue voluntarily. So about 8% of the properties of the buildings identified in these 4 survey areas were determined to be significant, which is pretty good. Another 62% were found to be contributing. So that's 70% of these structures that really have some architecturally significant in one way or another, to one extent or another, architecturally, well, has architectural significance, we'll put it that way. Non-contributing is just what you think it might be. It's not 50 years old, and it may have some value someday, but it doesn't at the moment, based on the current measures. Then neighborhood by neighborhood. The darker blue, this is Denburn Woods. The darker blue areas are the significant properties. The lighter blue are the contributing properties. This is an area that where you've got a pretty good mix there, but really it's not an especially organized mix of significant properties and contributing properties. By contrast, to a certain extent, Shady Lane Estates has a fairly well-defined contributing area with a handful of significant properties. E.H. Prince subdivision, and I wish I could zoom in on some of this, but in the interest of time, we'll just note that obviously it's got the most buildings, the most properties, most number of significant buildings and contributing buildings. A lot going on there in that area, and I think anybody familiar with Downers Grove can appreciate that why this was called out for its significance. And then the honorary historical district corridor is along Maple Avenue here, and you've got a number of significant properties, a number of contributing properties as you go from east to west along Maple and then make that turn into the downtown. These maps are available in this document. You can go through and then find the corresponding property. There's a description of each property as well. And it was truly a team effort, and I've got a bit of a summary here, but before I get into that, I do want to mention the Lakota Group was hired about a year ago, almost a year ago, to do the work. but really, the document wouldn't be the document without significant help from volunteers, Pierce Downer, Heritage Alliance, and a number of just individuals who volunteered and helped, did some of the research. There were planning students, architecture students, who saw this as something that they wanted to be a part of. And they stopped by and contributed time and entered data, and that really helped the project move along faster than it might have. So the surveys in this document and any future surveys would be used as a foundation by the Architectural Design Review Board for the village, and they serve as the Historic Preservation Commission here in that role. They would be used as a foundation for reviewing any voluntary applications for historic landmarking, and then that information would be included with their recommendation to the Village Council, who has the final say. ADRB and the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency have reviewed a preliminary draft of this document already, just to make sure that everything was tied together. There were a few really modest changes made to make sure that it complied with the grant. So the document that you have before you is ready for acceptance, and of course, any other modifications that you may have or suggestions. The accepted version, of course, will be filed with IHPA and made available online, as it already is, but I really want to work on it and try to make it a little bit more accessible so that you don't have to sit and wait for a really ridiculously long time. We'll try to work on those graphics a little bit. Also like to get a copy of this in Downers Grove Library. Village staff and ADRB obviously will work with any building owner who's voluntarily seeking landmark status, and guide them along the way and through the process that would include ADRB and then Village Council. So that's about as brief as I can make this particular report. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
And just one final note here. This report is a great report. It is a research project. Just a reminder that the village is not proposing any landmarks or districts at this time or at any time, because the village operates a voluntary program that is based on residents requesting and making petitions to the Village Council through the ADRB. We would be reacting to voluntary petitions, and under our program, the Village Council is not mandated to approve any petitions, even if they're submitted. So this is as voluntary as it comes, and this is a great research project. We're happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you both for that. I'll take any questions or comments from any members of the audience first. Any questions or comments from the audience with respect to the motion to accept the Village of Downers Grove Architectural Historical Survey report that will be made at an upcoming meeting? Just making sure you were still paying attention.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm very pleased to see the village completing these studies of what our resources are, and I'm particularly pleased that some members of the Pierce Downers Heritage Alliance, along with other community volunteers, were able to help substantially and reduce the cost to the village of this information. I wanted to point out that there are communities such as Geneva, Illinois, that have made great use of their historic resources and built quite a strong commercial area around them. I'm hoping that the village of Downers Grove will also recognize the great attractiveness of many of these regions, such as the Maple Avenue Historic District and the Denburn Woods, Prince Pond, that have already been surveyed. And we'll find ways to work with the Chamber of Commerce and the Downers Grove Economic Development Commission to stabilize and to enhance the attractiveness of these historic buildings. They add a great deal to the character of the village, and I think this report helps you to understand, and the rest of the community to understand, just how significant that resource is in the community. So I'm very pleased to see this brought to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Other questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the Downers Grove Architectural and Historical Survey Report? Questions or comments from members of the Village Council? Commissioner Rankin?
Can you explain what a certified local government, what the benefit is to the village from being that? Is that just to receive grant funding or?
Well, that's a really good reason.
Of course. I just wondered if you could.
No, it is the, really, the official designation by the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency that a community has done everything, has a process in place for recognizing potential historic buildings, has that system in place so that it can accommodate it. And then there is the funding question. So those are really the benefits. It does say that we've gone through a process and a public process and established a need, and that we're willing to conduct these surveys and go through those steps.
Okay. And then, you know, I was just thinking about this. It was really interesting to see this and read the history. And, you know, they have details of every property. Do you think that someday down the line, are we going to do an effort to kind of reach out to the homeowners that are identified, and if they ever want to provide any additional information? Because there's a lot of blank parts, you know, like people may know history of their home that the surveyors weren't aware of.
Well, a lot of that data also came from our own records, which are, you know, more of the objective records. But as we went through this process and the surveyors were out taking photographs of the houses and making their assessments of buildings, the number of calls and the number of emails that we got was really pretty overwhelming. People do have the histories of their home and their buildings, and they did supply information. In fact, we got more information than we had areas that we studied. So it was. So there, we know that there's a lot of interest in the topic, and you know, we'll see how that plays out.
All right. Thanks.
Other questions or comments, Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say my own quick thank you to all the volunteers, the staff, for the hard work they did on this. I think it's a fantastic report. We have a lot of great history here in Downers Grove, and we should be proud of it. And it's good that we you know, publicize it and celebrate it in this way, and you know, give folks a tool to take advantage of it. And if they would like to you know, go through that voluntary process to have their home or neighborhood dedicated, I think it's important that we give them the foundation to be able to do that. And that's what this report does. So, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions or comments from members of the council? I echo those same comments to Commissioner Jose and express my appreciation to everybody that made this possible. This represents not the end, but the milestone in a journey that the village undertook some time ago to come up with a historic preservation ordinance that actually gave our residents both the choice and the freedom to preserve the history of either architecturally or historically significant buildings or even districts within our community. And this report is a big component of that. So I'm very pleased to see it accomplished. It's not just an important action item that has been accomplished. It's also very important to the historic preservation ordinance and to the ability to voluntarily recognize and protect architecturally and historically significant buildings within our community, which is important, I think, and increasingly important as our community is now more than 180 years old. As was noted, I'm sure as you found the survey, our residents know their history. They think it's important. They like the history that Downers Grove has. It's not simply a motto when we say that we preserve the balance between tradition and progress. We actually really do, and having this ordinance in place gives, again, residents both the choice and the freedom to seek the type of preservation for historically and architecturally significant buildings that I think it deserves. So I also want to thank everybody for making this possible. It's been a long journey. Dr. Goodman, did you have another comment or question?
Thank you, Mayor Tully. I did have an additional comment in answer to the question from Commissioner Rankin about what the significance of this local government, certified local government designation means. And I wanted to comment about that from the perspective of our group, the Downers Grove Heritage Preservation Corporation, that moved the 1846 Blodgett House from the location on Randall Street that it had occupied from about 1890 until that location was purchased by a developer who was willing to donate the house to a not-for-profit group for preservation, and we got the cooperation of the Downers Grove Park District to move it back onto the location very close to where it was originally on Maple Avenue before the Blodgetts moved it, to build the current museum. Now, a house that's had this checkered career as this one and been moved twice is not eligible for designation as an item on the National Historic Register. They have rules that if a house is moved that many times, it just isn't acceptable to them. On the other hand, there are many programs and grants, other things that would support the renovation and the installation of this as a public museum that would be helpful, but they're only available to institution or a building that has been recognized as historically significant. Now, the village, as a certified unit of local government, is empowered to recognize historic property such as this. And since it has such great local significance, it seems to me it's highly likely that that would be an action the village might take. Currently, we have donated, and the Park District has received and now owns this building, so it would be up to the Park District to decide that it wanted to apply to the village for such a historic recognition. But the village is now empowered through its status as a certified unit of local government to grant that recognition, which could then open several doors for continuing help and status for this historic property. And I regard that as a very significant power that the village has that can aid not only individuals but also other units of local government in achieving historic preservation. So that's my take on why it's so important that the village applied for, was granted, and maintaining its status as a certified unit of local government. Thank you.
Good point. Thank you for adding that. And with that, I think that brings us to the end of our workshop agenda.
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll come to the mayor's report then. And the sole item I have in the mayor's report is I just want to, as my colleagues did earlier, wish everyone, all residents of Downers Grove, as well as all the visitors who will join us in the coming days, a safe and happy Thanksgiving. We are blessed to have much to be thankful for, and it's appropriate that we reflect upon that and we gather with our loved ones on Thanksgiving. That ends my report. Turn it over to Mr. Fieldman for the manager's report.
No report this evening, Mayor.
And then we'll move to item 12, Enzo Petrarca for the attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Only 3 items to present tonight. The first is an ordinance amending the stormwater utility fees for 2014, an ordinance amending the water utility fees for 2014, and an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to rezone property located at 4245 Bel Air. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And that brings us to item 13, council member new business. Do any members of the village council have any items of new business they would like to share with the rest of the council at this time? Commissioner Olson.
I just want to renew the call that Commissioner Barnett's mentioned to convene sort of a more of a workshop meeting to discuss some of the economic development issues as we've previously discussed. I know it's been a request that Commissioner Barnett has made, and I look forward to working with the mayor, commissioners, and staff to schedule such a meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure, thanks. All I would ask is that we make sure we all understand exactly what the issues are. We've just had meetings over the past 12 years where sometimes they're a little ambiguous as to what the meeting's about. And I think in order to have a good productive meeting, you got to be very clear going in collectively what the issues are. I know one in particular was sort of the disposition with respect to the use of eminent domain. That's a pretty clearly understood issue, but that level of clarity is all I think we ought to have. I think that would be helpful, both the staff and the council.
We have a great opportunity coming up because the Economic Development Corporation will be preparing their strategic plan, which will include a discussion of all sorts of issues, including the use of economic development incentives and tools, that is tentatively scheduled for presentation of the council in February. So perhaps we could set up a more roundtable discussion of that document and those strategies at that time, and I think it would serve that purpose.
Agreed. Agreed. Any other items of new business?
Yeah.
Commissioner Barnett?
Maybe I didn't understand what you said, Dave, so I'll listen to it again, but that would strike me as way too late. If they're working on a comprehensive plan of their own, they ought to know our disposition on those subjects. We ought not be formulating them after they tell us how they plan on going about business. Unless I'm misunderstanding, that seems like about 1,000,000 years too late. So maybe I didn't hear it right. Somebody fix that later.
I think we ought to have the benefit of that. It's kind of a chicken and the egg type of thing. I'd like to know what they have to say before we have our meeting, and they want to know what we have to say before their meeting. Perhaps we ought to have 2 meetings. I mean, but seriously, let's identify what the issues are that we're talking about. I don't want to just talk about economic development issues because that could literally span anything.
They weren't. They were.
I agree.
Far more specific than that, Mayor. But
what's that?
They were far more specific than that. I don't have my notes from that. I brought that
well, that's all I'm
up
asking.
several weeks ago.
I recall some, but
there were 3 very specific, distinct items, and they were in no small part because we had a couple issues in front of us that were could potentially have benefited from a different disposition, and also in no small part because the EDC was working on that document. And whether it's 2 meetings or 3 maybe, because we might not sort it all out in one evening, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to tell the EDC that we're excited about receiving their plan of action without having, and then we'll do what? React to that and tell them that's great, but we wish you'd have done something different? These are 3 pretty big issues that are not, they're not unknown and ambiguous in such a way that we couldn't sit down and talk about them.
I don't disagree, and I wasn't commenting on anything that you said that's not as being ambiguous. I was simply reacting to the use of the word economic development issues that I don't believe came out of your lips tonight. I think now you reminded me what your other 2 issues were. They were specific. All I'm saying is that we have those 3 issues, and we know what those 3 issues. If it's 4 issues or 5 issues, we know what they are, because I also want to be clear that we're making sure that we draw the right distinction between policy decisions, which is appropriate for this body, and the strategic plan of the Economic Development Corporation, which is a separate entity.
Well, sure.
There's not 100% overlap.
But if 7 people are sitting up here saying there's 0 chance in hell we're going to go do any eminent domain, they ought to know that while they're formulating a strategic plan, that's all. I mean, just to use one example of it.
Don't disagree with you, Commissioner.
It sounded a lot like disagreement when you said, let's talk about it in February after we get the EDC report.
I don't believe I said that, Commissioner.
All right.
Maybe you did have to hear that again.
I'll review the tape. Thanks.
I think that actually came from the village manager, not me.
There wasn't big, strong agreement. Sounds like a perfect plan from you. Did I miss that?
That I want to see the plan before we meet?
Yeah.
I'd like to see the plan.
Okay, so you see it different than I do. That's okay, but we are saying different things. You're not agreeing with me and Dave. You can't agree with me and Dave on this subject.
Yes, I can, because I also think I said 2 meetings. So we can meet tomorrow if you'd like, and then we can meet after we get the plan in February.
We'll meet as soon as you and the FA folks assemble, call a meeting.
Who's the chair of that?
Not me. I don't know.
Finance Administration, we'll be more than happy to take that on. How about before the tree lighting? Dave, you available? As long as we exit by 4 p.m.?
I am.
Good. We'll have cookies and punch there. We'll have sweetness.
I like that. That's a good plan, I agree with.
There you go.
All right, everybody calm down a little bit. Any other items of new business for any members of the council? All right, well, I have one, and it goes right to this point. As I think I hinted at earlier tonight, I was in Seattle for the National League of Cities Conference, and one of the purposes for having the Congress of Cities Conference and Exposition is for members of many different communities to get together and gather on points of mutual interest to learn about what other communities are doing to solve many different issues. Like I said, one of the issues happens to be mobile vending. Economic development incentive tools was also one of the conferences I sat in. I'd love to have a meeting sooner than February to sit down and share everything that I brought back from that with the rest of my colleagues. I think they'd find it very interesting. So I'm all in favor of a meeting as soon as possible. That's fine with me.
So you'll be doing the presentation?
Oh, I don't think I'd be allowed to do that, but I'd be glad to share my information on it. But there were many other topics that were discussed during the meeting that I'd like to bring back, and so what I propose the village manager, if my colleagues would indulge me, is at an appropriate point in time when the agenda permits, I'd be happy to give a 15-minute, 20-minute, or we can even do it at a Finance Administrative Committee meeting. It doesn't really matter to me. I just want to make sure that I'm imparting to everyone here the benefits of both the presentations and seminars that were available that I attended at National League of Cities, as well as the more informal. I know Commissioner Durkin appreciates this. Sometimes you learn a lot more just from the informal conversations that you have with your colleagues at cities across the country. You find out that while we're all very different, we all have basically the same set of problems we deal with in slightly different ways, and we can learn a lot from our peers in other communities. So if that's acceptable to everyone, then I've asked the village manager to set that up whenever it's appropriate on the calendar, and I'll try to retain all that information between now and then. But do not let it interfere with having a meeting on economic development set of issues. That's higher priority. I have nothing further then, so I will ask at this point in time for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Neustadt?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. We are adjourned. Good night.